Hi, welcome to ET Edge Insights exclusive interview series. Today we have with us Mr. Sandeep Dua. He is the founder and global CEO of Guts and Gusto. Sandeep, welcome to our show. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
taking the time and speaking to ET Edge Insights. Let me begin by asking you, while planning for strategic alliances for global companies, what are some of the key challenges you see and how do you cope with those challenges?
It's a very good question actually. This is very broad because, it really varies, from company to company.
Right.
So we're talking about an India setup, we're talking about a global setup, what kind of a company, we are trying to, take over. So the list of qualifiers is, huge. It can run into, pages seriously. Typically, yes, our job is ultimately, to assist, advise, right? And ultimately, guarantee the clients, we are working with some
Right.
outcomes, which they want, right? We try to drill them, with questions, basically trying to ascertain, what they really, are trying to, go after.
Right.
And then our job is, kind of, fill in the blanks, basically.
Right.
So that's our job.
Right,
Yeah.
right. When we talk about mergers, what are the key aspects you take into consideration while going for a proposition for a merger?
There is no set of rules and, of course, regulations are there, if you're doing something, cross boundary, right? But then if we are just looking at, let's say, the Indian landscape, right? So if the organization is really, into regulatory kind of, compliances, then that is something, legal could be there, financial could be there. So those things, we'll definitely, kind of look at. And otherwise, if it's just a normal, plain, simple, strategic, acquisition, because strategy is a big word, for us
Right,
ultimately. So on the strategy parameters, we would sit with the senior management team, we would sit with the CFOs, also. We would try to ascertain, what kind of funds, are available. And then, of course, it's about the right pricing as well.
right,
So that is there, that's a secret sauce ultimately as to, what should be the right price,
right,
of a deal.
right.
So that is something, you just know with experience.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yes. So strategy is the core. Sandeep, how do you assess? Are there any metrics you use to assess while going through this process of
Sure. So
analyzing?
there are a couple of standard things which we would educate our clients on.
Right,
So we are very big on recurring revenue, let's say, right? So any
right,
business which is there with a recurring revenue, at least you're getting a confidence
right,
that that is something which is ultimately flowing as a fixed revenue
right,
stream. So
right,
that's one. Second is of course barrier to entry. So barrier to entry is quite big, which typically would mean that we would always advise our clients to make some
right,
good solid contributions where barrier to entry is high.
right,
So for example, let's say we're talking about a financial consulting business or any other consulting business. Now the barrier to entry is too low.
right,
You can open a consulting business tomorrow morning, so can I,
right,
right? So we look for businesses where there has been some good amount of sweat,
right,
which has been invested. It could be years of hard labor. It
right,
could be some IPs. It could be some trademarks. It
right,
could be some global presence. Let's say for a product or a service.
right.
So that's another important parameter which we look
Right,
at.
right. Sandeep, one last question. You've been a global leader, of course, the global CEO of your organization. But if you look at the Indian market, obviously, which is emerging, so if you have to make a comparison, like with regards to the global market and the Indian market, how do you see the Indian market scenario?
See, that's that's a tricky question actually. So I would say if you look around as of today, you would see for majority all of the global companies you'll see Indian leadership sitting there,
Right,
right?
right,
Now whether they're sitting in India or they're sitting outside of India, but I think the Indian DNA of leadership is quite strong.
right,
I don't know whether it is conservative or it plays on offense or a defense or whatever, or it's just an amalgamation of all these things,
right,
right?
right,
So I think that's a very important aspect. I've seen Indian DNA play out sectorally also globally quite well when it comes to leading companies. I
right,
mean, I've been in the corporate sector for about 25 years. I've led at a certain time let's say 15 to 19 businesses with a P&L crossing close to 600 billion dollars of revenues,
right,
right? So
right,
yeah, and this is also quite sectoral again. We're talking about collectibles, American collectibles, industry. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about research. There were, a couple of, important assignments, which we've done.
Right.
The main trait, which we look at is, accountability.
Right.
We look at accountability. At the end of the day, there are two things, which matter: accountability and execution.
Right.
If these two things, are not happening, plans, strategies, whatever, just goes for a six ultimately.
Right.
And there is a serious leadership crisis, in the world. There are no two thoughts, about it,
Right.
seriously. So when it comes to, hiring leaders, as well, I was just seeing, one of the podiums, outside, there was a saying, hire people, who are smarter than you. So we actually, use this
It's an interesting
metaphor,
thought, yes.
while working, with the clients.
Right.
I mean, hire your successors, who can really challenge you.
Absolutely.
Because leadership is prime. Ultimately, what matters is, leadership.
Right.
And all different rungs of the ladder, ultimately. It's
Right,
not just
right.
the CEO of the organization, right? So
Right,
it's all
right.
CXOs and, other team leaders and,
Right.
So I mean, what is a leader? A leader is a manager of managers,
Right,
ultimately,
right,
right? I mean,
right.
that's how simply we can define a leader.
Right. Right. On that note, Sandeep, wonderful conversation. You have lots of guts and your sense of humor and the way you carry yourself. I mean, that's commendable. Which I'll actually say it's gusto. So
Thank you.
all the best to guts and
Thank you
gusto.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep.